I'm glad to be back with you again. And today's topic is how to build trust to increase your influence. This is such a critical topic for leaders. It's something that I think we know inherently, but we can take it for granted if we're not careful. And the reason that I'm bringing this up today is I'm reading yet another interesting and good book, and it's called Rich Relationships by Selena Soo. And it really struck me. She's talking about just different circles of relationships we have and how to, kind of how to place people in them properly so that we know what kind of a relationship we have with them, be it very close inner circle level, or maybe it's a disconnected relationship, or maybe it's somebody that we know, but we want to keep them out of our circles because of, things in the past, whatever it may be. But then she also talks about there's other levels or layers where just we have just different interactions with different people. So it's a really interesting book. She talks about the subtitle is Create $1 Million Network for Your Business Through Relationships is what it's about, and how important relationships are in business as well as life. But there's a part in a chapter here about creating trust and safety that I thought was really interesting. And I just wanted to highlight the five things she talks about of how to build trust, because I think that as leaders, we really need to be reminded of this, and we need to be able to maybe be more intentional with our own trust building ourselves, as well as maybe even communicating that to our team members about how they can build trust greater with coworkers, customers, clients, and beyond. So let's just jump in. There's five things we're going to talk about, and the first one is time. That trust takes time to build. And I think this is so critical, but it can be overlooked because it seems almost too elementary, where we just realize that, I don't trust people right off the bat. I might like them, and I might think there could be some good things that could come of the relationship, but trust does take time. People need to prove themselves to me, and I need to prove myself to others. And to think that we don't, I think is kind of a false narrative that we have to be careful of, because we do need to give ourselves the grace and others the grace and that space to really prove ourselves that we're trustworthy. To demand that of somebody, like, you need to trust me just because you now know my name, is ridiculous, quite honestly. And trust can be burned if you trust somebody too quickly because you're thinking, well, I like them. They seem to be really good at X, Y, or Z. I think they'll be great for our team, or I think they'll be a great person to bring into this project, or whatever the case may be. I want to hire them for a project as a contractor or vendor. And then you find out later, almost after it's too late because you already brought them in, that they're not trustworthy. Maybe they put their best foot forward, but they weren't trustworthy. And so time reveals that, right? And I think that's something that's very important is giving people time and expecting that people will need to give us time to prove ourselves. And if we do that, then we kind of manage those expectations. And there's a lot of great people that I meet along the way pretty much weekly, but I don't necessarily know them. I think they're nice people. I think they have good things going. I just don't know yet how they're going to perform on these other things we're going to talk about. And time will be the thing that reveals that. We need to make sure that we don't rush the process of trusting people too quickly. We need to make sure that they pass some of those trust building tests. And one thing she even recommends in the book is, like, if you're going to work with a new vendor, a new person on your team, is to set parameters for, maybe it's a 60-day window or it's a project based test to see, how does this actually work, together? Are we good together? Are we not? Are they trustworthy? Are they not? Just, is this a good interaction? Is this a good relationship that we're forming? So give yourself time, make sure that you understand people need to give you time to prove yourself, but also give them that time to prove themselves. And you can even communicate that to people and say, you know what, I really like you. I think that maybe there's some good things that we could do together, but I also don't want to jump in too quickly. I've seen this happen. I've seen leaders who get excited very quickly. They meet somebody that has a certain energy, a certain charisma about them, and they're like, "Oh man, I'm all in. They're awesome." And then, like, I always get real nervous when I hear people jumping into the deep end with others so quickly, because I'm like, is this going to work out? I hope so. I hope it does. But I think sometimes we can be irrational about trusting people too quickly without them necessarily proving themselves and making sure that it really is a good fit and a good relationship. So first is time. Second is consistency. I could talk about this all day long because consistency is something that compounds over time. If you are a consistent person in how you interact, how you work, how you carry yourself, how you show up, are you the same person in private as well as in public? There's so many things that can come into this consistency category, but I think it's so vital because people need to know what kind of a person are you as a leader? What can I expect of you as a leader? And if you're not consistent, you kind of give people this emotional and mental whiplash, and that's really not good at all. And I've seen this way too often where, you know, some days this person's really on and they're great to work with or be around, and the next day they're a train wreck, right? And I don't know what to expect from day to day. You don't want that. Consistency is a huge trait that I believe is a character trait. I believe it's a skill to develop. And I believe that it's critically important if we're going to truly be the kind of people that attract and inspire and retain other people on our team and in an organization, whether that be a team member, or whether it be a customer or client, even with personal relationships. Are you consistent? If you're a parent, do your kids know how you're going to show up from day to day? If you're married, does your spouse know how you're going to show up from day to day? That's so important if we're going to truly have influence the way that we want, because once again, building trust is a key factor in increasing your influence. And so consistency is a key part of building that trust. When you work, do you work at a consistent level? When you're out and about meeting people, if I met you in one setting and I saw how you were and how you acted, would you be that way in a different setting if I came across you there? This is the type of stuff we have to hold ourselves accountable to. Is, am I the same person? This is an integrity issue in my mind. This is something where, are you that consistent person of character? Are you consistent in your work ethic? Are you consistent in how you treat people? There's all sorts of things that kind of fall into that consistency bucket. But the reality is people want to do business with people they know, like, and trust. And trust is built through time. It's built through consistency. The third thing it's built by is professionalism. As a leader, are you professional? Are you someone who under promises and over delivers, or are you someone who over promises and under delivers? Are you someone who shows up putting your best foot forward and how you're going to interact with people, work with people, do the work that you promise people? Are you being professional in how you engage with people? One of the challenges I think in leadership is that fine line between that personal and professional wall that we often kind of build in our organizations. I like to get to know people personally so I can lead them best and truly know them and care for them. But I also understand that there has to be lines that we have to be careful not to cross, because sometimes you can become so personally invested in somebody that you lose sight of the professional relationship and you don't necessarily lead them well, because maybe now they're too good of a friend to you, and so instead of saying the hard thing, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to hurt their feelings because they're my friend. Well, these are the tensions that we have to navigate and manage in leadership. But I also believe that if we can truly engage with people and care about them and build that personal relationship on one level, while also keeping a professionalism by managing expectations, clearly stating expectations, following up on projects and deadlines, and making sure there's accountability in the organization. Those are professional qualities that you as a leader can demonstrate and model and act out, live out in your day-to-day work life, while still having personal caring relationships about the people you're leading. I never want to be a robot, right? I never want to feel like it's a very robotic, transactional kind of a relationship. I want people to know I do care about them. But I also want them to know that, hey, we have a job to do. We have work to do, whether that's if you're a team member and you're having that relationship and conversation internally, or whether it's with a customer or client that you get to know, and over a series of years and projects together, you're like, you know what, I really like this person. They're a friend of mine now. That's great. That really is great. But there still has to be a level of professionalism. One of my clients and a friend of mine, he has been great over his 15 plus years in his business of building solid relationships with his clients and customers. But I also know that he has a very high standard for his team to deliver on the promises and on the work that they do. So he manages both that relational professionalism, making sure that he's, investing in those relationships while also making sure that his team and he are delivering on the professionalism side of getting the job done, of doing the task, doing the work. So once again, professionalism is critical. You also need to think about professionalism and how you show up in the sense of what is the setting you're in. I'm not a person who loves to just dress up at all. I like to be fairly casual. Business casual is fairly normal in our world today, which is great. But there's also times where a suit and tie is required of me. There's certain times where, you need to show up in a certain way and we need to be mindful of that. And I think that there's people who sometimes lose credibility because they don't think about the space they're entering. So when I go to a conference, when I go to a workshop, when I go speak, I'm always thinking about, well, what is the setting? What is the expectation here? Is it a suit and tie formal kind of a setting? Is it more of a casual setting? Think about that. Just be mindful of that because I don't think it's just about being in a suit and tie or dress if you're a woman, always in a power suit kind of a thing. Excuse me. I think it really depends on the setting. If I'm going out to a pool party, right? And I show up in a suit and tie, that seems kind of off too. I haven't really been thoughtful about that. I was actually at an event a few years ago, and a speaker showed up who was not part of the event as a whole. He was kind of an outside speaker that somebody had found and wanted to bring to the group. And he had a good message, but I'll never forget how he kind of entered the space. We'd been outside all day. We were doing activities. It was a men's event all day long. We'd been doing all sorts of outdoor challenges and sitting around a campfire and it was just an outdoor experience kind of a thing. Playing flag football and all sorts of games and things, challenges that we were doing. This guy shows up to speak that evening, and he rolls up and we're all like in shorts and t-shirts and kind of sweaty and kind of the end of the day, and he just felt out of place a bit because he showed up and he wasn't like he was super dressed up, but he was wearing jeans, but he was also wearing like dress shoes and a sport coat. It wasn't anything that he did wrong necessarily, but it was that he just kind of stood out in a way that the other speakers of the day who had been with us all day long just was more one of us. He was not one of us based on how he showed up and how he appeared. Once again, great message. Don't want to throw any rocks at him for what he did that way, but I don't know that he was even really informed on what he was showing up to, first of all. So I don't know that. The other thing is, I don't know if he really thought about asking that question. But he was used to speaking on different professional stages and different places. He was kind of doing this as a favor to the event organizer, and it was great. I'm glad that he came. It was excellent on one level. But I also just remember how he seemed kind of out of place because of the environment that he was in. So once again, didn't mean that he needed to show up in shorts and t-shirt as well, like the rest of us were for that day. But it was just something noticeable that always reminds me that thinking about what is the environment, what's the setting that you're showing up to, and how can you show up appearance wise, also mentally and relationally. How do you enter the space? How do you engage with the people? When I show up to an event and I don't know people, I like to mingle. I like to walk around, introduce myself to at least a few people, and ask how things are going. If it's a conference or a seminar kind of a day, I want to see what are they learning, what have been their highlights. Just kind of getting to know people, getting a feel for the environment and paying attention to that. To me, that's a level of professionalism. That's not about the dress code necessarily. That's about the engagement of how do you show up and make yourself connecting with those people. So give yourself time, be consistent, understand what professionalism looks like in different settings. The other thing that she brings up in this book that's really interesting is accuracy. And I think this is really important because a lot of people inflate, I'll say, or flat out lie, could be how some people are doing it, about their success. You know, um, there's a lot of online marketers, and early on in my business, I would watch videos and I'd see these people in front of mansions or really expensive cars or in these really posh settings, and I'm like, man, they've got it together. And then I started hearing noise about how people would rent those mansions for a day or rent those cars, or you just kind of make themselves look like they're more successful than they are, and that really is a turnoff, right? Because that's not accurate to who they are and what their business is. That's really that fake it till you make it to an extreme. So one of the things she talks about in her book here, she says that, she knew somebody that flat out just lied about the amount of like email subscribers or followers they had in their business. And the more she was asking questions to clarify some things, this person was getting defensive. And she says, I realized that she'd been inflating. She'd been lying about her success and how many people were following her and how many people she had built as a customer base. And she said, it was one of those things where it made her question, well, if she's lying about this, what else is she lying about? And it really kind of told her, I need to be careful with this person. So being accurate is really important. And I think that there's a lot of pressure on this, especially in the online space. You know, we see a lot of highlight reels on social media. We see a lot of people talking about their success, but be accurate about it, right? If you're new in business, you don't have to act like you've got a multi-million-dollar business. You can say, you know what, we're growing, we're improving, we're increasing our customers and our revenues. You can talk about the journey and people respect the journey. But if you came on board and said, hey, in the first month, we're now a seven-figure business and blah blah blah, and it's just a flat out lie to try to show people or show up to people or impress people, that's not going to go over well. And so I really want to encourage you that however you're reporting your success or your company's success, be accurate. Don't say that you're a Fortune 500 company if you're not. That can be fact checked, right? Don't say that you're a top 50 of some category if you're not, because that can be fact checked. And maybe a lot of people don't do the fact checking, but if they do and they find out that you're lying, well, guess what? Your credibility is gone. That trust that you wanted with those people is over. And then word spreads because now it's like, hey, that person, be careful with what they say. Be careful because they inflate their numbers or they lie about things. This could happen internally, right? If somebody's trying to impress coworkers and talk about their sales figures or their, customer satisfaction scores or whatever it may be, if they're lying about those things just to try to impress people, that erodes trust within the team drastically and very quickly. Trust truly is built over time. It can be lost in a moment, and it takes years, sometimes never, can be rebuilt. So be very careful about things that you're saying. And, do we make mistakes sometimes? Sure, but you can apologize and say, you know what, I thought we had X number of customers in this category, and I found out when I went back to my numbers that that's not true. That's People respect that you clean that up. People respect that you are, you're like, you know what, I thought that we had something better than we did. That's understandable. We can make mistakes and we can recover from that, being honest. But if you're just flat out lying and trying to inflate things to make yourself or your company look better, that's going to really backfire when people truly understand what's going on in your business. There's been a lot of entrepreneurs that I know that, they feel that pressure to look more successful than they are. And, they feel like there's this fine line of being honest and saying, you know what, I'm a struggling beginner versus I'm so successful in my business. The reality is people respect your true journey more than they respect how big you say you are. Now, are there people out there who have massive followings and massive influence? Absolutely. But it took them years, sometimes decades, to get there. So be honest with where you are. Be truthful about your numbers. Be truthful about the journey you're on. And that accuracy actually wins people over and has more trust, because when you're saying to somebody, hey, you might think I've got all this together, but I've got this part together, but I'm struggling over here. Right. So I think being honest about where you are, being accurate in what you're saying and how you're presenting yourself is critical in this trust journey as well. And then the last but not least of the five categories that Selena Soo recommends or talks about in her book is emotional regulation. This is interesting because I think it is very important. I don't think it's talked about enough. And what she's talking about in here is, do you have outbursts? Are you emotionally consistent? Can you handle your emotions well under pressure? And I know for myself, when I think about this, I know when I'm facing a deadline or there's a big project and I feel that mounting pressure, I have to be very careful to keep myself emotionally regulated. We need to find outlets where we can kind of blow off steam and be honest and maybe have that safe person around us or some people where you can just kind of download and dump on and say, man, I just got a lot going on. Can I just like word vomit on you so that I can just get this off my heart, my mind, my chest? That's fine. But how do you show up in your day-to-day setting as a leader? Are you that consistent person in general, but are you consistent in your emotional reaction through your responses? And do you respond versus react and have outbursts? If something goes wrong, how do you respond? I think this is a challenging one. We want authenticity to be true and real in our organizations. We also want to make sure that our emotions are kept under control because if they're not, then it can do a lot of damage to the team. And Selena talks in her book about a former employee that seemed great, took on a lot of work, and kept expanding her role because she was doing a lot of good things, but she was apparently having a bunch of emotional pent up angst building, and they didn't know it. And all of a sudden, she started having outbursts, and even in projects she wanted to take on to prove herself more, then she started feeling pressure. And when she was questioned about the timeline of some things, she just had these emotional outbursts. And it ended up getting fired. Actually, she quit, but I think she was going to get fired because it was just an unsafe kind of environment around her. People didn't know what to expect anymore because she let that stress boil over. And we have to be very careful about that. Some people are very emotional kind of all the time, and you have to control that. Other people, and this is where I feel like I fall into, I'm more like a pressure cooker. Like I can absorb and absorb and absorb for a long time until I know I can just start to feel like I'm getting ready to burst, right? I'm getting ready to explode if I'm not careful. And so I have to find ways to make sure that that doesn't happen. So knowing yourself and how you respond or react emotionally to situations is critical. If you can learn to regulate your emotions, if you can say, you know what, I know we're going into a very busy season or we have a big project and big deadlines and all these things coming up, I need to kind of mentally prepare ahead of time. How am I going to respond when things don't go as planned? How am I going to respond when the pressure's on? Because when you go into a situation and you're clear on how to be ready to do that, I think you're going to handle it much better. But it's a sign of maturity. Little kids throw temper tantrums, but we also see temper tantrums being thrown by grown adults who should well have passed that stage of life, right? And if we as leaders want to grow in our trust and grow in our credibility and grow in that influence, we can't be this emotional outbursting kind of a person. It just isn't going to set well because it sets your team up to kind of walk on eggshells and to feel like what is the day going to be like? It goes back to that consistency piece. See how consistency ties into all this is that am I showing up emotionally in a positive way, just like I show up professionally or show up in accuracy with how I tell facts and figures. Emotional regulation is critical if we're going to be the kind of leader that people trust and feel safe around, that they, even in the hard times, they know they can come to us and we're not going to explode, that they know that we can handle whatever they need to, bring us. If it's bad news, they know that we're not going to just, go off the deep end emotionally. They know that we're going to be level-headed about it. We're certainly not going maybe going to like the news. We're not going to celebrate bad news on one side of it, but we're going to say, okay, well, let's take a step back and let's think through this. Let's work through this and deal with this and keep your cool. Keep your head about you. And when you do that, it makes people feel like they can come to you. They trust that you are a person that they're safe with, that they can bring you bad news. But if you're the person that you're like, oh my gosh, I have to go tell bad news to this person, and I know it's going to be an explosion, that's not good. That's not good. That damages your credibility. There are leaders I know that are very good in a lot of ways, um, but people don't want to tell them the bad news, even when they need to, because they expect an emotional outburst of some kind. So it's something that you may have to really work on. Some people are more level-headed naturally. Ahead of things so that the consistency that's required, the professionalism that's required, being accurate, and then also having that emotional regulation so that people know what to expect from us. If you do these five things, like she's suggesting in this book, Rich Relationships, you will be a person that attracts more people to you and more people want to be around you, right? That's the magnetic influence of what you can be, is that you're the kind of person I just want to be around. I trust you. I trust that you have my best interest in mind. I trust that you have others' best interest in mind. I trust that you're going to be the same person tomorrow that you are today. I trust that when things go sideways, that you're going to help us navigate that without emotional outbursts and temper tantrums. Like when people know that about you, it's very attractive. And it's not just about people wanting to be on your team. It's also about that retention piece, because people are like, you know what? This is a good, safe environment that I want to be a part of. It's something that I want to be, this team is something I want to be a part of long term, because the culture fit here, because of the leader's mindset, the leader's attitude, the leader's approach is so healthy and so good. So that's how you build trust and increase your influence. It's with these five core things. And like I said, inside each of these, we could probably go into, we each could be an episode in and of themselves, where we talk about more and more layers within each. But I wanted to give you that high arching kind of a topic today, because I thought this stood out a lot just as I'm reading through this book. And how do you build healthy relationships, as she calls rich relationships, that are ultimately valuable to yourself personally and professionally over time. So if I can help you in any way, with your leadership development, with your team's development, check out McClureCoaching.com. You can sign up for a free strategy session there, and I'd love to sit down and talk to you about kind of where things are, where you'd like to go, and what's the path in between that we could help get there. So take care, God bless, and we will see you next time.